A father's driving his 3 kids through Gage Park on a Sunday afternoon. They're arguing in the back seat about what to name the puppy. There's a baby on board sign in the window, with the youngest just 3 years old and the oldest 9, all on the way to pick the puppy up. All of a sudden, a car pulls alongside them on South Homan Avenue. No one argued, no one shouted, and without warning, the driver opened fire. The father is hit by what prosecutors later described as a barrage of rounds. The children are struck too with fragments, shrapnel, and flying metal, and surprisingly, all 3 survive, but the father does not. Police would later say the man who pulled the trigger had never met them, that there was no dispute, no history, or even a motivation, and the killer was just 17. Prosecutors say this was not his first time, and by the end of 2020, 6 men would be dead across Chicago's southwest side, all on different blocks, different days, and with the same gun. The killer's name was Antonio Reyes, aka Red Room, and for 9 months, no one connected the dots. To understand how that could happen, you have to understand where it happened. Chicago's southwest side is not the part of the city that makes national news. It is not the south side that dominates crime statistics and documentary filmmakers' imaginations. It is not the Gold Coast or the Loop, where tourists take photographs and money moves through the glass towers. The southwest side, neighborhoods like Gage Park, Brighton Park, Clearing, sit between the expressways and the rail yards. Block after block of bungalows and 2 flats, taco shops and churches, front lawns with the chain-link fences, and alleys that run behind every house like veins through the body of the city. These are working neighborhoods, majority Latino, first-generation and second-generation families, people who drive to work before the sun comes up and come home after it goes down, people who work at warehouses, at UPS, at construction sites, at the meatpacking plants and auto body shops that line Archer Avenue, people who keep their heads down because they came here for stability, not attention, people who chose these blocks because the rents were manageable, the schools were decent enough, and the neighbors looked out for each other. But the Southwest Side also has gangs. It has had them for decades. The Latin Kings, the Satan Disciples, the 2-6. They are embedded in certain blocks, certain schools, certain families, and they have been there long enough that their presence is part of the landscape. Something residents navigate around, something parents warn their children about, something that most people in those neighborhoods will never be directly touched by. The relationship between gangs and neighborhoods in Chicago is not simple. It is not the case that every young man in Gage Park is in a gang, or that gang membership inevitably leads to violence. Most Latin Kings members will never kill anyone. Most will age out, find work, start families, and leave their lives behind in their 20s. The gang is a social structure. It provides identity, belonging, protection, and income in communities where all 4 can be scarce. It is also a structure that normalizes violence, that rewards aggression, and that creates an environment where a gun is not a theoretical object, but an everyday tool. Antonio Reyes entered that world at an age when most teenagers are still figuring out who they are. By the time he was 16, prosecutors say he had already figured it out. He was Red Room, and he had a .40 caliber handgun. Most people in these neighborhoods will never encounter that kind of violence firsthand. In 2020, 6 of them did. None of them survived. Almost nothing is publicly known about Reyes' early life. No school records, no family statements, no childhood photographs released to the press. What is known comes entirely from police reports, court filings, and the statements of prosecutors. A life defined not by where it began, but by what it allegedly became. He lived on the Southwest Side. He was affiliated with the Latin Kings. His street name was Red Room. That is the sum of his publicly documented biography before March 2020. What prosecutors later pieced together is a timeline. It begins on a Monday, March 2nd, 2020, the 2600 block of West 59th Street, Gage Park. The world had not yet locked down. COVID-19 was a distant headline, something happening in other countries. Chicago was still functioning normally. The buses were running, the schools were open, and the corner stores were busy. It was a Monday. It was unremarkable. Francisco Magana was 31 years old. He was crossing the street. That is all he was doing, walking from one side of West 59th Street to the other in broad daylight in his own neighborhood. According to police, a car pulled up. There were 2 people inside. One of them was Antonio Reyes, then 16. The car slowed. Both occupants opened fire. Magana was hit. He fell, but he was not dead yet. Prosecutors say Reyes got out of the car, walked to where Magana lay on the pavement, stood over him, and shot him again at point-blank range. Then he got back in the car. Then the car drove away. That detail, the standing over the body, the deliberate close-range shot into a man already on the ground, is the kind of detail that separates this case from the vast majority of Chicago shootings. Most drive-by shootings are fast and chaotic. Bullets spray, cars speed off, the shooter's gone before the victim hits the ground. What prosecutors describe here is something else. It is methodical, it is controlled, it is, if the allegations are true, the act of someone who wanted to make sure. Magana died at the scene. He was the first. At the time, there was no arrests. No suspect was named publicly. Chicago would go on to record 769 homicides in 2020, the highest total in years, driven by the pandemic, the economic collapse, and the social upheaval of that summer. Francisco Magana became one of them, a number in a spreadsheet, a case file in a detective's stack, a name on a memorial that no one outside his family would remember. His death was not connected to what came next, not yet, not for years. 34 days later, April 5th, 2020. The country was 3 weeks into the first COVID-19 lockdown. Chicago's streets were emptier than they had been in decades. Restaurants were closed, schools were closed. The governor had issued a stay-at-home order. People stayed inside, not because they wanted to, but because the world had told them to. The city had an eerie, half-abandoned quality. Fewer cars, fewer pedestrians, fewer witnesses. For someone who wanted to kill without being seen, the timing was ideal. Claudio Cosio did not stay inside. He was 21. He worked at UPS, one of the essential workers who kept the country running while everyone else sheltered in place. On the afternoon of April 5th, he was sitting in his car on the 4100 block of South Sacramento Avenue in Brighton Park. The car was double parked. He was alone. He was doing nothing that could be interpreted as provocative, threatening, or dangerous. He was just sitting in his car. A vehicle pulled up next to him. The driver opened fire into Cosio's car. Multiple rounds, at close range. Cosio was struck and killed. He died shortly after. His family later said they had no idea who Antonio Reyes was. They had never heard the name. Cosio had no gang ties, no criminal history, no disputes, no debts, no enemies that anyone knew about. He was a 21-year-old UPS worker who got shot to death while sitting in a parked car because someone decided to kill him. The question of why has no documented answer, but according to prosecutors, what happened after the killing is almost as disturbing as the killing itself. Court filings allege that Reyes recorded a video of himself reenacting the Cosio shooting, not confessing to a friend, not bragging in a text message, reenacting, physically acting out the shooting, as though it were a performance, as though it were a scene in a film he had directed and wanted to watch again. No one saw the video at the time. No one connected this killing to the one a month earlier because there was no reason to. 2 shootings a month apart in different neighborhoods with different victims and no apparent link. In Chicago, that is not a pattern. That is a Tuesday. No one knew that Reyes was keeping score. 26 days later, May 1st, 2020, this one was different. This victim was not a stranger, and that makes it worse, not better. Damian Duran was 16 years old. He lived in Gage Park. He was, by all accounts, a friend of Antonio Reyes. Not a rival, not an enemy, a friend, someone he spent time with, someone whose mother had seen Reyes come to the house, had watched them leave together. On the afternoon of May 1st, Duran's body was found in an alley on the 5200 block of South Homan Avenue. He had been shot multiple times. He was dead when the police arrived. A witness reported seeing someone in a gray hooded sweatshirt running down the alley after the shots were fired. The figure disappeared. The alley was quiet again. There is no publicly documented motive for Damian Duran's murder. No falling out described in court filings, no rivalry, no debt, no betrayal. Whatever happened between Reyes and Duran in the hours or days before that afternoon has not been made public. All that is known is that Duran was Reyes' friend, and that someone shot him dead in an alley, and that police believe that someone was Reyes. Killing a stranger is one kind of act. Killing a friend, a 16-year-old friend, someone your own age, someone whose mother knows your face, is something else. It suggests a disconnection so profound that normal categories of motive fail to explain it. But what happened next is perhaps the most disturbing single detail in the entire case. It is the detail that prosecutors return to again and again. It is the detail that, more than any other, defined Antonio Reyes in the public narrative. Duran's mother, Marlon Rangel, did not yet know her son was dead. She knew only that he was missing, that he had left earlier that day and had not come home. Night was falling. She was frantic. She began texting people. She reached out to anyone who might know where Damien was. She reached out to Reyes on Snapchat. She asked him, begged him to tell her where her son was. Reyes responded. His message, as later relayed by Rangel to investigators and reported in the press, read, "That's why your son is going to rot in hell." Not a denial, not a deflection, not silence, a taunt, a deliberate, specific, targeted cruelty sent directly to the mother of a boy he had just allegedly killed, sent through a disappearing message platform, the kind of app designed so that words vanish after they are read. But Rangel remembered every word. She would later become a key witness. She told reporters that her son had been friends with Reyes, that she had seen Reyes pick Duran up earlier that day, and that she had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. She did not know in the moment she was texting him that she was talking to the person police believe murdered her child. She was asking a killer where her son's body was, and he told her son was in hell. There is something that needs to be said plainly here because the timeline demands it. 3 people were dead, 3 separate shootings, March, April, May, 1 killing per month in the same cluster of neighborhoods, all allegedly committed by the same person, and no one had connected them. This is not unusual in Chicago. In a city that recorded over 700 homicides in 2020, pattern recognition is a luxury that detectives rarely have the resources for. Shootings blur together, witnesses are scarce, cases go cold before they are warm, but the gun did not change, and the shooter, according to prosecutors, did not stop. There was a gap, nearly 2 months of silence. May, then most of June. Whether Reyes paused by choice or by circumstances unknown, whether he was lying low, whether he was distracted, whether he simply did not encounter the right opportunity, none of this is in the public record. The gap is a blank space in the timeline, and blank spaces in cases like this are unsettling because they suggest a kind of restraint that does not match the rest of the picture. Or perhaps it was not restraint at all. Perhaps it was simply timing. Then came June 24th, 2020. By this point, Reyes had turned 17. Summer had arrived. The pandemic restrictions had loosened somewhat. The streets were busier, and according to prosecutors, Reyes was upset. He had gone through a breakup. His girlfriend or ex-girlfriend had ended things, and whatever emotional architecture existed inside Antonio Reyes was destabilized by it. In the hours before the next shooting, he sent text messages to his ex-girlfriend. In one, he told her he was going to kill a king, a reference, police believe, to a fellow Latin Kings member, though the statement is ambiguous. In another message, he sent her a photograph of himself holding a gun while driving, not hidden, not subtle. A photograph of a 17-year-old behind the wheel of a car, holding a firearm, was sent to an ex-girlfriend as though it were a selfie. These messages would later become key evidence, but at the time, no one reported them. No one called the police. The messages existed on a phone, unseen by anyone who could have intervened. Luis Davalos Garcia was 26 years old. He had no criminal record, no gang affiliation. He was a working man with a girlfriend, and by the evidence in his car, a young child or a child on the way. He was parked outside his girlfriend's house on South Rockwell Street in Gage Park, sitting in his car. There was a baby on board sign in the window. It was evening. The street was residential, quiet. A silver sedan with distinctive wraparound taillights appeared on the block. It passed Davalos Garcia's car. It stopped. It reversed or circled back. Then shots were fired into the parked vehicle. Davalos Garcia was struck in the head. He was taken to a hospital. He did not recover. He died. A surveillance camera on a nearby building captured the silver sedan. Reyes's car, investigators say, passing, slowing, stopping, and then the muzzle flashes illuminating the interior. It was the clearest piece of physical evidence yet. It placed a specific vehicle at a specific location at a specific time, and that vehicle could be traced. Unlike the previous 3 killings, this one would eventually lead to an arrest, but not immediately, not for another 5 months. In the meantime, more people would die. The shootings did not stop after Davalos Garcia. There was another gap, this one longer, 4.5 months. Summer turned to fall, the leaves dropped, the election consumed the country's attention. Chicago's homicide count climbed past 700 and kept climbing. And then in November, it accelerated. 3 shootings in 18 days, as though something had been building, and the dam broke. November 8th, 2020. The 5,400 block of South Homan Avenue, Gage Park. Jose Martinez was 31 years old. He was a father. He was driving his car on a Sunday afternoon, and in the back seat were his 3 children. They were ages 3, 6, and 9. They were on their way to buy a puppy. That is the kind of detail that breaks a case open in the public imagination, not because it changes the legal calculus, but because it makes the randomness impossible to ignore. It strips away every abstraction, every statistic, every euphemism about gun violence and community safety. A father, 3 small children, seatbelts, excitement, and the promise of a new pet, and a car pulls up alongside them. According to police, Reyes approached Martinez's vehicle and opened fire. Martinez was hit by what prosecutors later described as a barrage of bullets. He was critically injured. He would linger, for how long, reports differ, before eventually dying from his wounds. But he was not the only one hit. All 3 children were struck. A 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old. Bullets or fragments from bullets entered the car where they sat and hit each of them. All 3 survived, but each was wounded by gunfire or shrapnel in the car where their father was dying in the driver's seat. Prosecutors later noted, in language that was precise and devastating, that the children witnessed their father being shot. Reyes would eventually be charged with Martinez's murder and the attempted murder of each of his 3 children. 3 separate counts for 3 children who had been on their way to buy a puppy and instead watched their father bleed out. There is no documented connection between Reyes and Martinez. No gang tie, no personal grudge, no prior interaction. Martinez was a stranger. His children were strangers. They were in the wrong car, on the wrong block at the wrong moment. And a 17-year-old with a .40 caliber handgun decided that was enough. One day later, some sources say it was the same week. As reports conflict slightly on the date, the next killing occurred. November 9, 2020, the 4700 block of West 59th Street, Clearing. Justin Gonzalez was 20 years old. He had a girlfriend. He was sitting in his car on a residential street waiting to pick her up. It was the kind of errand that a million young people run every day. Drive to someone's house, park, wait, scroll through their phone until they come outside. A red Jeep appeared behind him. It followed. It pulled alongside Gonzalez's vehicle. The driver opened fire. Gonzalez was fatally wounded. Before he died, he told officers that he had never seen the shooter before in his life. He did not know who had shot him. He did not know why. He died without an answer. There was no motive, no connection, no provocation, no road rage, no mistaken identity. Or if it was mistaken identity, it was a mistake in the broadest possible sense. The mistake of being alive and visible on a street where Antonio Reyes happened to be driving. Cook County prosecutors later noted that there was no known link between Gonzalez and Reyes of any kind. The killing appeared to be, like the others, entirely random. 17 days later, November 26, 2020, Thanksgiving Day. Most of Chicago was indoors, families were eating, the streets were emptier than usual. Pandemic Thanksgiving, smaller gatherings, fewer trips. A 27-year-old man was out in Gage Park running errands, the kind of thing you do on a holiday when you need to pick something up or drop something off. A red Jeep appeared. The same red Jeep investigators believe that had been used in the Gonzalez killing 17 days earlier. Shots were fired. A bullet grazed the man's scalp. He was wounded. He bled, but he survived. He was the only person targeted by Reyes, according to prosecutors who lived to describe it. This was the last known shooting attributed to Antonio Reyes. It brought the total to 6 dead and at least 4 more wounded, including 3 children under the age of 10, across 9 months in a cluster of Southwest Side neighborhoods that most Chicagoans could not locate on a map. 6 dead. And still at that point, no one had connected the cases. No one knew a single person was responsible. On December 7, 2020, police arrested Antonio Reyes. He was 17 years old. He was charged with the murder of Luis Davalos Garcia, the June 24th killing, the one with the surveillance footage, the one with the text messages to his ex-girlfriend. It was the case with the most evidence, the one where the threads came together, a car on camera, messages on a phone, a timeline that could be reconstructed minute by minute. At a detention hearing, he was ordered held without bail. He was placed in juvenile custody initially. He was still 17, still technically a child in the eyes of the law, and later transferred to adult facilities. He would not leave custody again, but at the time of his arrest, he was charged with only 1 murder. 1. The other 5 killings, Magana, Cosio, Duran, Martinez, and Gonzalez, remained open cases, unsolved. The .40 caliber shell casing sat in evidence bags at the crime lab, each one stamped with the same tool marks, each one waiting for someone to pull them together and see the pattern. The families of those 5 men continued to wait. They held funerals. They built memorials on the sidewalks where their sons and fathers and brothers had died. They lit candles and left flowers and asked the question that every family in their position asks: when will someone be held accountable? The answer was, not yet, not for a long time. For the next 4 years, Antonio Reyes sat in Cook County Jail. He was formally booked into the adult division on October 27, 2021, when he turned 18, a procedural milestone that moved him from juvenile to adult custody. The Davalos Garcia case proceeded slowly, as cases do in Cook County's overburdened criminal courts. Continuances were filed, motions were argued, the public heard nothing. There were no news stories about Reyes between his 2020 arrest and 2025. He had disappeared into the system, one defendant among thousands in a county jail that routinely holds more than 5,000 people. He was not famous. He was not infamous. He was a teenager charged with one murder in a city that averages 2 murders a day. Then, in November 2022, something happened inside the jail. Prosecutors say Reyes attacked his cellmate. The weapon was homemade, a shank fashioned from a nail, the kind of crude instrument that circulates in jails and prisons everywhere. He allegedly stabbed the man repeatedly, inflicting serious wounds. The cellmate survived. Reyes was charged with attempted murder for the assault. He was 19 years old. He had been locked up for nearly 2 years, and he was, according to prosecutors, still violent, still dangerous, still, even in a locked facility, surrounded by guards and cameras and concrete, willing to inflict serious harm on another human being. But what happened outside the jail during this same period revealed something perhaps even more troubling about the reach of the case, and of Reyes himself. At some point during his incarceration, the exact timing is not clear from public records. Prosecutors allege that Reyes communicated with associates on the outside. Specifically, he asked an 18-year-old named George Reyes, no confirmed family relation, though the shared surname is noted, to take care of a person named Sebastian Serrano. Serrano was a friend. He was also, apparently, a potential witness, someone who knew things about the 2020 shootings, someone whose testimony, if it were ever given in a courtroom, could be damaging. The phrase "take care of" is vague enough to provide deniability and specific enough to be understood. Prosecutors say George Reyes understood it. In late 2021, another associate, 19-year-old Andres Giler, contacted Serrano and lured him out of his home. Once outside, Serrano was shot dead. Both Giler and George Reyes later pleaded guilty to murder in connection with Serrano's killing. Antonio Reyes was not charged in Serrano's death. The evidentiary chain connecting his jailhouse communications to the actual shooting may not have been strong enough for a formal charge, or prosecutors may have made a strategic decision to hold it in reserve. But the implication was stated plainly in court proceedings. A teenager, jailed for one murder, had allegedly ordered the killing of a witness from behind bars. The system had removed Reyes from the streets. It had not removed his capacity to cause death. The break in the larger case came from ballistics and digital evidence, the oldest and newest tools in a homicide detective's arsenal. Investigators had recovered .40 caliber shell casings from multiple crime scenes across 2020. Each casing, when fired, is marked by the unique imperfections of the gun that fired it, microscopic scratches and impressions left by the firing pin, the breech face, and the ejector. These marks are as individual as fingerprints, and when the casings from the Magana scene, the Cosio scene, the Duran scene, the Davalos Garcia scene, the Martinez scene, and the Gonzalez scene were finally analyzed together, side by side, under a comparison microscope, they matched. One gun, 6 crime scenes, 9 months. The question that hangs over this revelation is obvious. Why did it take so long? The casings existed from the moment each shooting occurred. They were collected, bagged, and logged. They sat in evidence storage. The technology to match them existed in 2020, but the analysis was not done, not across cases, not in a way that would have revealed the pattern until years later. This is not an indictment of individual detectives. It is a description of a system under siege. Chicago's crime lab, like its police department, operates under staggering volume. Thousands of shootings per year, thousands of casings. The backlog is not a failure of will, it is a failure of resources. And in that backlog, 6 connected murders hid in plain sight. At the same time, detectives combed through the Reyes' digital footprint. Police described him as having been active on social media, a phrase that, in the context of a murder investigation, carries a specific implication. Investigators said they found several postings linking him to the murders, the Snapchat messages to Duran's mother, the text to his ex-girlfriend, the reenactment video of the Casio shooting, photographs, statements. a digital trail left by a teenager who apparently did not believe he would ever be caught, or did not care if he was. Each piece, individually, was incriminating. Together, they built a mosaic that prosecutors believed was sufficient to charge. On February 25, 2025, more than 4 years after his initial arrest, more than 5 years after the first killing, Chicago police announced new charges. Antonio Reyes was charged with 5 additional murders: Francisco Magana, Claudio Cosio, Damian Duran, Jose Martinez, and Justin Gonzalez. He was also charged with the attempted murders of Martinez's 3 children and the 27-year-old man wounded on Thanksgiving Day. The next day, at a press conference attended by every major Chicago news outlet, officials used language rarely heard in a city that has grown numb to gun violence. Cook County State's Attorney Burke said that none of the victims had ever met Reyes before, and that there was no discernible reason he targeted them. Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling said it was as though Reyes had been killing someone every month, that the case reflected a level of disregard for human life that was difficult to comprehend. He said detectives had removed a serial killer from the streets. Prosecutors used the term serial murders. The press picked it up. The headlines wrote themselves. That label, serial killer, is worth pausing on. It is worth sitting with because the phrase carries weight that goes beyond its technical definition. And in this case, the weight is complicated. In the public imagination, serial killers are a specific kind of monster. They are older. They are white. They are methodical. They have basements and journals and rituals that span years or decades. They are the stuff of Netflix documentaries, FBI profiling units, and best-selling books. They are Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and BTK, names that have become cultural shorthand for a particular kind of evil. Antonio Reyes does not fit that template. He was a teenager. He was Latino. His alleged method was blunt and unrefined. Drive up, shoot, drive away. His victims were chosen, as far as anyone can tell, at random or near random. There was no cooling off period that stretched across years. There were no elaborate rituals or signatures. The killings were compressed into 9 months. They were fast, public, and crude. They looked on the surface like what Chicago calls street violence, the kind of killing that gets 4 paragraphs in the Sun-Times and is forgotten by the next news cycle. But the FBI's own definition of serial murder, 2 or more killings in separate events, applies. And the pattern, as prosecutors described it, had hallmarks that went beyond what gang violence or street crime typically produces: escalating frequency, apparent lack of motive, the targeting of strangers, and, if charging documents are to be believed, psychological gratification. Court filings contain an allegation, and it must be emphasized that this is an allegation, drawn from charging documents, not from proven fact, that Reyes told someone he experienced sexual arousal when shooting people, that he liked to return to the scenes of his killings afterward and urinate on the memorials left by grieving families, that the act of killing produced pleasure not just instrumentally, but physically. These are the kinds of allegations that prosecutors do not casually include. They are the kinds of statements that, if verified, place a case outside the boundaries of conventional gang violence or impulse killing and into territory that most people would rather not think about. They suggest something beyond recklessness or anger or even cruelty. They suggest compulsion, enjoyment, a need that repeats. Reyes has not been convicted of anything. He is presumed innocent. These allegations may never be proven in court, but they are in the record, and they are part of the reason this case landed differently than the hundreds of other murder cases filed in Cook County that year. They suggest something that the system, the schools, the social services, the police, the courts was not built to see coming. Not in a 16-year-old, not on the Southwest side, not in a city that has spent decades treating gun violence as a problem of geography and demographics rather than a problem of individuals, because the system did not see it coming, and it did not respond after the fact, not quickly enough, not comprehensively enough. 6 people were killed in 9 months in overlapping neighborhoods within a few square miles, and the cases were not connected until years later. The shell casings were not cross-referenced. The digital breadcrumbs were not followed in real time. The Snapchat message, sent by a suspect directly to the mother of his own victim, a message that practically confessed to murder, did not lead to an arrest for nearly 5 years. This is not a failure unique to one detective or one precinct. It is a structural reality of policing in a city like Chicago. Homicide clearance rates in the United States hover around 50% nationally. In Chicago, they have historically been lower, sometimes significantly lower. In some years, fewer than 1 in 5 Chicago homicides resulting in arrests. Detectives carry crushing caseloads. Resources are concentrated on cases with the most public pressure, high-profile victims, mass shootings, cases that generate media attention and political heat. And when victims are young Latino men shot in Gage Park, when the neighborhoods are working class and the press conferences are small and the families do not have the connections or the English fluency to demand answers, the pressure is often not there. This is not a conspiracy. It is not malice. It is triage, the grim arithmetic of a system that has more cases than it can handle and must make choices about which ones to pursue most aggressively. But the consequence of that triage is that some killers keep killing and some families keep waiting. Reyes was arrested in December 2020 because one case, Davalos Garcia, had surveillance footage and text messages that made identification straightforward. The evidence came together. The case was workable. An arrest was made. The other 5 cases went cold. It took 4 more years, and what appears to have been a retrospective review of ballistic evidence, possibly triggered by the Serrano witness killing, possibly by a cold case initiative, to connect them. By then, a witness was dead. A cellmate had been stabbed, and 6 families had spent years without answers, without closure, without even the knowledge that the person who killed their loved one had also killed 5 others. Consider the victims for a moment, not as names on a charging document, not as entries in a table of alleged incidents, but as the people they were on the last ordinary mornings of their lives. Francisco Magana, 31, was crossing a street in his own neighborhood on a Monday afternoon. He was walking from one side to the other. He had no reason to believe that crossing West 59th Street was a dangerous act. It had never been before. Claudio Cosio, 21, a UPS worker sitting in his car on a quiet afternoon during the pandemic. He was doing his job, or had just finished, or was about to start. He was 21 years old and working while the rest of the country hid. He was essential. Damian Duran, 16, a teenager who considered his killer a friend. He left the house that day the way 16-year-olds leave houses, quickly, without explanation, probably with a vague promise to his mother that he would be back soon. He was not back soon. He was never back. Luis Davalos Garcia, 26, parked outside his girlfriend's house with a baby on board sign in the window. He had someone waiting for him inside. He had a child coming, and he had driven to a house where he was loved, and he sat in his car for a few minutes too long. Jose Martinez, 31, is driving his 3 small children to buy a puppy. He was a father doing the most fatherly thing imaginable, taking his kids on a Sunday errand that they would talk about for weeks. They would have named the puppy. They would have argued about who got to hold it first. Instead, they watched their father die. Justin Gonzalez, 20, is waiting in his car to pick up his girlfriend. He was 20 years old and in love, or at least in like, and he was doing the simple chivalrous thing of driving to someone's house and waiting for them to come outside. He was looking at his phone, or at the sky, or at nothing, and then he was looking at a red Jeep, and then he was dying. None of them was armed. None of them was in a confrontation. None of them, according to every available source, had any idea who Antonio Reyes was, or that he was about to appear in their lives for the last seconds of their lives. Their family spoke after the February 2025 charges were announced. Claudio Casio's mother, Nohemi Casio, said she felt relieved that she believed justice would finally be served after nearly 5 years of waiting. Damian Duran's mother, Marlon Rangel, described the horror of learning the truth about her Snapchat conversation with Reyes, of realizing, in retrospect, that she had been pleading for information from the very person who had taken her son from her. These are the people left behind. They are not footnotes in a criminal case. They are not supporting characters in someone else's story. They are the weight that this story carries forward, long after the press conferences end and the cameras leave. As of early 2026, Antonio Reyes remains in Cook County Jail, awaiting trial on all charges. He has pleaded not guilty to every count. He has not spoken publicly, not a single word to the press, not a statement through an attorney, not a social media post from behind bars. No family member has issued a statement on his behalf. No defense attorney has offered a counter-narrative or an alternative theory of the case. There is only silence where an explanation should be. There have been no convictions. There is legally no serial killer, only an accused one. The presumption of innocence applies, and it will apply until 12 jurors say otherwise. Pre-trial proceedings continue. Court dates have been scheduled and rescheduled. March 2025, then June 2025, then beyond. The case involves dozens of pages of filings, multiple victims across multiple crime scenes, ballistic evidence, digital evidence, witness testimony, and the complication of charges that span both juvenile and adult jurisdiction under Illinois law. It will not resolve quickly. High-profile murder cases in Cook County rarely do. His juvenile records are sealed. Whatever happened before March 2020, whatever teachers noticed or didn't notice, whatever interventions were attempted or weren't attempted, whatever family circumstances shaped a 16-year-old who allegedly walked up to a stranger on the street and shot him at point-blank range, is not part of the public record and may never be. That is perhaps the most unsettling gap in this story. Not the motive, which may never be fully understood even if Reyes is convicted. Not the method, which was blunt and brutal but not mysterious, but the silence before it began. The absence of a legible origin. The fact that as far as the public record is concerned, Antonio Reyes did not exist before the first shot was fired. 16 years of a human life, growing up, going to school, forming relationships, learning language, learning the neighborhood, learning whatever it is he learned, and none of it is visible. None of it was documented. None of it is available to explain what came next. There is only the violence, sudden and total, as though it appeared from nowhere. Chicago absorbed this news the way Chicago absorbed most of its violence, with a brief burst of attention and then a turning away. The press conference made headlines for a day, maybe two. Social media shared the story for a week. The mugshot, the list of victims, and the word serial killer in capital letters. Cable news ran a segment. True crime podcasters circled. And then the city moved on, because there is always another shooting, another press conference, another name, another family standing at a podium asking for justice. But the people in Gage Park, Brighton Park, and Clearing did not move on. They cannot. They live on the blocks where this happened. They drive past the intersections. They park their cars on the same streets where Cosio, Davalos Garcia, and Gonzalez parked theirs. They walk past the alleys. They remember the memorials. 6 men are dead. 3 children carry scars, physical scars, and the other kind. The kind that does not show on x-rays, but that shapes the rest of a life. A witness was murdered, allegedly on orders from the accused. A cellmate was stabbed with a nail fashioned into a blade, and a young man who was 16 years old when it started. 16, the age of driver's permits and junior prom, and the last years of childhood, sits in a cell, saying nothing, waiting for a trial that will attempt to determine whether the word that prosecutors and police have used is the right one. Serial killer. It is a phrase that belongs to a different kind of story, or so we tell ourselves. It belongs to other cities, other decades, other demographics. It does not belong to a teenager on the southwest side of Chicago during a pandemic. But the allegations say otherwise. The shell casings say otherwise. The timeline, March, April, May, June, November says otherwise. The evidence will be presented. The jury will decide. The system, which failed to connect these killings for 4 years, which allowed a 16-year-old to allegedly kill 6 people in 9 months without detection, will now attempt to deliver the accountability it could not provide in real time. Whether that is justice or simply the closest available approximation is a question that Francisco Magana, Claudio Cosio, Damian Duran, Luis Davalos Garcia, Jose Martinez, and Justin Gonzalez are not here to answer. Their families are, and they are still waiting.